What's up, y'all, and welcome back to your Hair Made Simple, the podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, and I'm coming to you live from Podcast Movement with a bonus episode. We just wrapped up season 2, but I'm here at Podcast Movement learning about being a podcaster and wanted to record this special episode for all those who feel like they are burnt out in life, trying to navigate wellness, trying to navigate the journey, and then trying to figure out how to care about their hair in the midst of that. So if you feel like that is you, or you know someone who that is, text them the link to this episode. But we're going to get into it. I have a wonderful podcaster and my new friend, Nickole, who has her own podcast, Woman I Am You, and I'm excited to get into this conversation with you, Nickole.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Shannon.
No problem. So I'm going to jump right on into the first question. Okay. What's your hair story?
What is my hair story? That's a deep question.
It truly is. So,
when I was a young girl, my hair was very long. My mom always used to put it in Shirley Temple curls, funny enough. And then, I've always felt like hair represents kind of where I am in my life. And for me, I've always been very stylish, I like to think. So
for those who are listening to the audio, Nickole has on an amazing blue dress, these beautiful hoop earrings, this beautiful short haircut with curls. So very much stylish. Got to give the visual.
Thank you so much. And so for me, as I mentioned, so there's different times in my life where my hair has been long, it's been bob, I've had it straightened out, I've had it highlighted. For me, I'm in the kind of place in my life where I'm all about kind of returning back to me. And so now I'm just kind of wearing my hair short and curly, as you mentioned, kind of natural. And it's really freeing for me. And it's freeing for me because I, as Shannon mentioned, am a podcaster, but I also am a full-time mom. I've got a full-time job, and I need something that's going to be easy, carefree, so that I can get to where I need to be on time.
Absolutely. And I think too, there's so many people, right, who want to achieve, who love to show up in excellence, who have all these commitments, right? Like, even if it's not kids, it's their career, or it's like their passion projects on the side, or it's caring for their family, or it's all of those things, right? And trying to figure out how to show up for themselves in the midst of that. And to your point, it's very freeing to embrace our natural hair, but sometimes some people can feel like it's just like another thing to do, right?
For sure.
And so how do you kind of combat that like mindset a little bit, or what does that look like for you in the scope of your own wellness journey?
For sure. Well, I feel like, again, for me, it's more about, what do I have on? What am I trying to convey? And what does that look like for me? For me, depending on what I have on, I might have my hair, I wear it in a mohawk sometimes. Sometimes I might pull it back wet. So for me, I think, again, my hair is just kind of representing what I'm trying to convey out in the world.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
But that what gives you the motivation to like make sure it's done, to make sure create space for that?
Absolutely.
I think in the scope of all the busyness, right?
Yes.
Like, you have this hairstyle and you landed on the shortcut, right? And that what was most freeing for you.
Yes.
So for folks who are in this busy lifestyle and trying to figure out how do I incorporate my hair into this, right? Because they want to have healthy hair. And what does that look like? You said you had long hair, you wear mohawks. Right now you have this beautiful shortcut. So how did you land at this space of like saying this is the way you wanted to embrace your hair, and it is very stylish, but in the scope of your whole life and in making room for yourself and wellness in the midst of all the busyness you have?
For sure. Well, I also think that I take time for my hair, even though it's short, even though it's easy. I take time to care for my hair, just the same way that I would care for my body. Right. I think I shared with you early on, Shannon, that I enjoy running. That's part of my health and my wellness. So I think taking care of your hair and making sure that you're not kind of running it to the ground as you would your body is very important. So I do take the time to wash it with the right stuff. I do take the time to make sure that the products and the ingredients that are in the products that I use make sense, because I think it is very important, just overall health and well-being, and your hair is definitely a part of that.
Yeah. So how did you like get to that point? I guess what has the in betweens of that look like for you?
Mhm.
So being at the point where you have the curly hair now, being a mom, being on this journey, how did you come to the decision that this was the most freeing style?
So it's interesting. I think it went back to when I was on, so I don't know if I shared this with you. I used to dance for the Chicago Bulls. I was a Chicago
Oh
Lovable.
wow.
And shout out to Chicago. When I first auditioned for the team, my hair was actually fairly long. And I remember going through the steps of, auditioning. There's probably about 4 or 5 steps. It was a
Yeah.
long time ago. And one of the things that I remembered someone saying is that I would be obviously sweating all the time because I was dancing. So for me, because again, I feel like my hair represents me, I wanted to have a style that I felt that would, one, look nice, represent who I am, and then also at the same time, when I'm sweating, what is that going to
Right,
look like?
right.
Because one of the things about being on a team like that, the way you look in your appearance is very
Yeah.
important. And so through that, that's what made me really make the decision to cut my hair because I knew that, one, I felt like that was a good representation of me. And then two, because again, I wanted to make sure that I could do my hair and present myself in the way that I wanted to present
Yeah.
myself to the world. Like since that time, because that was years ago, I let my hair grow out and then I had kids. So that's another time frame where, for those of you guys that are mothers, again, I was looking for a style that
Yeah.
would be easy for me, that represented me, and gave me the time again to be able to do all the things that I needed to do in my life.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially like one, the Chicago Luvabulls, because that's something where you're very much on display, right? Your
Yeah.
appearance is criticized and critiqued quite
Oh,
often.
was it?
Was it, right? And so having a space where you were in the lens and choosing to take ownership of it and like really control your own narrative around look like what you look like for your own, like managing of yourself, but managing your appearance is powerful.
For
But
sure.
also the other pivot point of motherhood, right? And so motherhood can come with its own things. I think even if you're not a mom, lots of people can experience stress in their own lives, but motherhood is a different type of, structure that shows up in our bodies.
For
Different
sure.
people can experience hair loss, all these other things, and even just coming out of that. And then if you're having more kids, really just going on that journey. So it sounds like the choice that was freeing for you was detaching from a certain aesthetic.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and then two,
Mhm.
so growing up with long hair, so I'll tell you a funny story. Growing up with long hair, a lot of it was built around also what I think people perceive you to be. And so for me, again, I feel like hair is art. And so I like the idea of being able to create art that represents you. I know I keep saying this over and over again.
Yeah.
But to the point where even when I was a young girl, I don't know if you guys played with Barbie dolls, but I did.
I definitely had a Barbie or two. I was a bit rougher with mine. They might be missing their heads. The Barbies hated to see me coming. But yes.
So for me, even with my Barbie dolls, they had the long hair. I would cut their hair. I would cut their hair. I would cut their hair. I would like try to style it in different ways. That was very like, I would say creative. And again, represented, I guess, what I was trying to represent for the
Yeah.
Barbie doll. So for me, it just seems like I've always gravitated towards that. Like,
Yeah.
again, being a representation of who I am. And I don't need long hair. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
sometimes people associate that with, "Oh, she's pretty and nice and yeah, okay, I might be those things, but I'm also a woman and I want you to see who I am from
Yeah.
within." And so for me, it's all maybe even a rebellious thing for me. Like, no, I'm cutting my hair because you're going to see me. You're not just going to see a long beautiful, pretty hair. You're going to see me for who I am.
Yeah. And is that kind of connected to the Woman I Am You journey of your podcast, right? And
Yeah.
really separating yourself from allowing the stresses and all the other ways that you have to show up in your life and saying, this is a narrative that I'm taking back for myself with my hair.
Yeah.
Using it almost as a way, instead of thinking of it as something that is another thing to do, it's like, this is the thing that I get to do for myself, is how it sounds like you shifted your mindset to really be able to embrace your hair.
Yeah. One of the things, even within the podcast, I talk a lot about is doing things for other people, worrying a lot about what other people think. And a lot of times I've lived my life based on what other people think. And so, even I guess as a representation, my hair, it's me kind of getting myself back to who I actually am.
Yeah.
And that's the journey, interestingly enough, because sometimes you spend your time, you know, just doing things in life, trying to be perfect, trying to do again what everybody else thinks you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And you forget about who you are, or you detach from what that looks like for you. And I think, even in my hair journey, when I'm trying to figure out what my next style or cut is, I would even ask my family, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this style? And sometimes there would be a style that I knew that I wanted, that I loved, and they would say about that. And so, I made a decision many times, like, I don't care what you think. It's my hair. I like it, and I'm gonna do it. And when I would come home, they'd be like, oh my God, it's so cute.
It's like, yes, I knew it was going to be cute because it's my hair. I know what I'm doing and I know what I like, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, again, do believe that it is a huge part of who I am. And I've always wanted people to see me for who I am. And at times, I believe as women, we're not always seen, felt, and heard. And our outer appearance, a lot of times, is what drives what people perceive us to be. And I think that's very unfortunate because sometimes people don't even get to know you because of what they perceive your outs or what they feel your outside tells them. And I think that's an issue. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I did start the podcast, Woman I Am You, because I wanted women to see themselves in other women. I wanted them to understand that we all have struggles, issues, challenges, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from. And if you could have a place where you can have those conversations and actually see women that are thriving and doing well in their life who've broken outside of the box, it gives you the opportunity to know that you can do it yourself.
Yeah. I really appreciate your perspective on this topic. And even now that I've learned a little bit more about your journey, even just sitting here, for those people, right? Because there are some folks who are just struggling with carving out the time, are struggling not with necessarily what other people think, especially with what other people would think, but also even into coming into their own and embracing their natural hair. Like, I guess, what advice or tips would you give to those folks, right? It's not, some of it is like, oh, I have to show up at work and I'm expected to look a certain way, and but that can really like feed into people's own self-talk. So even when they're not in those spaces, that's still the dialogue that's happening in their mind, right? Or it's like one comment can take them out and it's back to the drawing board. And so how do you, especially like when you were still like in that space in the Chicago Luvabulls and deciding to cut your hair and having, to show up every day and take whatever criticism, or even when you go through the changes again, like how do you combat hearing the feedback sometimes that does come, maybe not as often as we expect, but the criticism sometimes, and still choose to show up as yourself and meet those other moments where, right, it's like, hey, actually your hair does look amazing, because it does, right? But we also navigate these other spaces.
So it's interesting. So I'll take it back a little bit because I'll take it back to bring it forward.
Yeah.
So even in making that decision to cut my hair on the Luvabulls, it was a decision for me, but it did not come without having a conversation with the director. She was fine with the short hair, but she did not want me to show up with my curly hair. And that did have an effect on me because I think for a long time I didn't wear my hair curly. I didn't appreciate the hair that God gave me.
Yeah.
And so it did affect me. And then I think bringing it kind of forward, I think that, you know, having different experiences in my life, I talk about this on the show too. The point in which I start the show is at the point where I separated from my husband and I had to start reflecting a lot on myself and how did I get here and what am I doing here and what am I doing at all. And so I think that my journey has really been one that, I've taken a lot of criticism. I've taken a lot of, sometimes negativity. And even I've done some modeling and stuff in my life as well. And sometimes, even in auditions, I'm making a decision. Am I going to wear my hair straight or is it going to be curly? And I struggle with that sometimes because it's like, well, what do they want to see? And you never know, right? You never know. But I think that, again, it became, as I have gotten older, it's becoming more about what is it that I want versus what is it that someone else wants or sees for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that as women, we do go through those different things. But what I would advise is that you try and you experiment with different ways to wear your hair, to do different things, because that's how you get to what is best for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. Right. It's like, we just have to choose ourselves regardless
You
sometimes,
always
which is so
have
much
to.
easier said than done. So it's kind of like
It
a bit like cliche to
is.
say, but sometimes it's the thing to fall back to. Like when I'm sitting at home alone, like, am I going to be happy with the decision that I made? Am I going to be happy with how I'm showing up in this space? And something that I've even been working on is like my personal self-discipline, right? Like my
Yeah.
personal self-discipline with my own choices that I make. But I think that really translates across to this conversation as well. And like to our natural hair is sometimes it's like, I think the term wellness, it's also like the soft life, which there's nothing wrong with that, but also like luxury or like things that are very much with ease. But sometimes I think wellness comes in the form of self-discipline and saying like, I'm gonna show up,
Yeah.
I'm gonna wash my hair. If
Yeah.
it's too much for you at a certain length, like I'm gonna choose to maybe cut it and try a shorter style, but like freeing ourselves to find the thing that works and then committing ourselves to continuing to show up to do that thing that works,
For
right?
sure.
Which is not like the traditional kind of hair talk, right? But it's really the mindset surrounding embracing our natural hair because everything starts within us.
Correct.
And then it pours out of us like what we're giving to that journey.
Yeah, I think your hair is a reflection of you.
Right.
So if you're taking care of yourself, if you're exercising, if you're educating yourself, if you're learning, if you're trying new things, that all shows up in your hair.
Yeah. And then to the other point of that, kind of like going back to the people we're saying this episode is for, right? The people that are burnt out on time, like if you're stressed, you're trying to figure these things out, and you're also kind of like struggling with your hair. It's like your hair is also reacting to your stress. Like,
Absolutely.
it can cause hair thinning, it can cause hair shedding, it can cause, all of these other issues because our hair is actually reflecting what's happening in our bodies, what's happening in our diets, what's happening
No
in
doubt.
our mind. Like I've experienced that where like my hair was growing slower, it was, thinner
Yeah.
at certain points,
Yeah.
partially because of diet things, like there wasn't getting enough vitamins or nutrition, and partially just because of very significant stress from working very stressful jobs and trying to
Yeah.
show up in all these ways in all
No
these
doubt.
spaces. And regardless of what kind of hair you have, like that can happen to anybody,
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's about the journey of self-discipline and the journey of, deciding what is going to be the one thing or the one decision with our hair or style even that's just going to allow us to show up as who we want to be in our lives in a more freeing space. And if that's, wearing a fro and it's not textured, like I wear my hair like unstyled sometimes, like in the summer, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, like it's not really curly, it's just here and we're going off vibes. So,
Right.
you have a beautiful shortcut and you chose to do that, at a point and at a time where, it made sense for you. And so I think like sometimes giving ourselves the permission, giving
And
ourselves the
let it be
permission
okay.
and
You
letting it be
know, but
okay.
I think that it's hair, it's in general, right?
Yeah.
It's like, sometimes we're so hard on ourselves and we put so much pressure on ourselves. And sometimes it's just okay to be okay. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's okay to give yourself grace. And sometimes you might even realize that when you do that, your hair ends up in a style that maybe you didn't mean to have it in, but it looks great. I
And
mean,
you go out and you get a billion
and you get a
compliments in the world. I actually had this happen
Absolutely.
to one of my friends recently, and she has 4C hair, and so she like wore two twists in the front, and then she pulled it back into
Yeah.
like a back kind of fro.
Yeah.
And she went out and she was like, "Yeah, I just did this like really quick because I had to go out," and I got all these compliments, and I was
Yeah.
like, "I'm so glad that you gave yourself the permission to do that and
Absolutely.
to just try something
Try new
different and try
things.
something quicker." And it be a new thing,
Yeah.
and see that the world responds to you in some ways that you didn't even expect. And it's so much better than what you ever
Absolutely.
anticipated. And
Yeah,
we're often our own worst critics because
we are.
we look at ourselves and we like have all the impressions that other people have put on us of how we need to show up. And sometimes it's
Absolutely.
about just choosing, I'm going to try and see. And
Right.
then figuring out, hey, there's actually a whole new world here, right?
And it's okay to fail too. Like
That too.
you
Talk about
you
it.
you could try a hairstyle and it doesn't work. And you're like, what in the world is this, right? But it's okay. You don't ever have to do it again.
No.
But you try.
And I think it's so funny because there's definitely, I feel like people find their signature hairstyle,
Yes.
like one that they always want to go back to, or like always like to revisit. But it's very true. It's like
Yeah.
what fits your personality, what frames your face well, like all of those things
Yes.
are questions
Matter.
to ask yourself in that matter. And then what just makes you feel the best when you show up?
That's right. That's
And it's
right.
keeping your hair healthy in the process, right? Like
Yeah.
because that's the other important thing to consider. It grows out of our head. It's a part of us. It's responding to, what we're putting
What
in
we're
it. It's
going
responding
through.
to what we're going through.
Mhm.
And so really recognizing it as a part of ourselves and like giving room to explore what it means to be like wholly connected.
For sure.
Yeah.
No doubt. No doubt about it at all. You know, one thing I would just kind of like to say too is that this conversation, again, is so aligned with my podcast as well,
Yeah.
because again, it's all about finding yourself, finding that joy from within. I think that hair is a representation of joy as well, right?
Yeah.
Like when you look good, when you have your hair done the way you want it to, it makes you feel
Okay.
like a whole different person.
Because when I see my girl Brooke, when I go get my ends trimmed and she does, it's so nice to have somebody else do your hair too. I do my hair myself often, but also embracing if you need somebody else to,
Come
step
along.
in. There's nothing wrong with that. I feel like
Absolutely.
the natural conversation sometimes like you have to be doing your hair yourself. I think you should know how to, right? Like in the event
Yeah.
you need to, and if you have that time too. But sometimes it's helpful to have the support, support hands step in and love on your hair too. So I don't think there's no right or wrong way to do
It's
that. It's
not.
like what is making sure that your hair is the healthiest. So I did want to
For
say
sure.
that and put that in there as well because I do my own hair, but when Brooke does it, I'm like, my skin is clear. The world is bright.
You feel like a
Yeah,
whole different person.
a whole new woman.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate what you said about joy because, especially for the folks, like I've been there, I've been stressed and burned out. And when I go and I wash my hair, I'm like, okay, I feel better. I feel like a new person, like my scalp is clean.
Yeah.
And so if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling stressed or whatnot, like often that's a sign of so many other things happening in our lives. But
Yeah.
maybe instead of hair being the thing that's another stressor, it can be the thing that brings you more joy. It's like I'm gonna just choose to like try and show up in a new way. I'm gonna choose to try and show up in a new style. I'm gonna choose to try and show up in a new look and explore my confidence in this new avenue in this new way
Yeah.
as a way to pour into yourself when it's
Absolutely.
harder to do it in the other spaces of your life.
I agree. And I mean, hey, like your hair can go with what you have on. You know what I'm saying? Like you have on something that you're going out on a date, and you want to, fix your hair and put it up or pin it up or put like a little barrette in it or, you know what I'm saying? Like it all goes back to a reflection of how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
And how you want to present yourself to the world, not what the world wants to present you as.
Yes.
So I really, again, I think that like I guess what I just want to convey is that although hair is not who you are, it is a representation. Absolutely.
It's what you're choosing to put out into the world.
Of what you want to put in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
As we wrap down, because it sounds like our one piece of advice is really just thinking about how you want to be portrayed in the world and choosing to embrace and enjoy. So, with that being said, if you could say one affirmation to your hair right now, what would it be?
If I was to say one affirmation to my hair, it would be thank you, and I accept you for who you are and what you've given me.
Accept you for who you are and what you've given me. And I think that word acceptance is so important, right? Like truly accepting your hair for who it is, for what it is, for how it shows up, and just choosing to embrace the styles that best embrace it back, right?
Absolutely.
Whatever that looks like for you, whatever your hair is, because all of our hair is beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Nickole, thank you so much for joining me on the show today at Podcast Movement from
Yes.
the Yeah Media Studios and hopping in kind of on the spot to do this. For those that are listening, thank you so much for tuning to this episode. As we wrap, remember to subscribe to the show newsletter. You can find it in the link in the episode description. And complete our survey, surveying just letting us know what you want to hear more of, what you care about when it comes to natural hair content. So until next time, remember that all hair is good hair and your hair is good hair. And we'll talk soon.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.
Take care. And also, one more thing, if I can just also check out Woman I Am You, which is also on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio.
Yes, you heard it here first. Woman, I Am You, getting back to yourself. So thank you again. Make sure to catch Nicole's podcast. Continue to join us and let us know what natural hair conversations you care about. And we'll continue to put out authentic natural hair stories.
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.